right, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Hoops 360. On today's episode, we will get into a WNBA CBA update. We have a brand new proposal as of Wednesday. We are over a week away from the extension deadline. Could this mean that we're getting close to a WNBA CBA agreement? More on that in just a moment. Plus, we will break down the Big Ten. Who is the biggest threat to UCLA in that conference, and did they just reveal themselves this past week? Plus, we're going to see how college athletes are becoming investors into professional leagues and what this means for NIL in the future. Remember, every single week we get to your questions, your comments, and your concerns. Anything that you want us to discuss here on the podcast, send it to hoops360@yahoosports.com. Let's get into it. She is Cassandra Negley. I am Caroline Fenton. And Cass, we have some CBA news. The latest that we learned late on Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning is that the latest proposal would move the max salary from $250,000, just a little bit less from $250,000, and under the current CBA to $1.1 million. The minimum salary, which is now about $66,000 for 0 to 2 year players, new players, would move to $220,000. That would put, under this new 2026 proposal, the average salary right around $460,000. Now, this is still being negotiated. This is not finalized. This is not what it is going to be, but it's at least the latest proposal that we do have. Your thoughts and your initial reaction?
At some point over the summer, ESPN reported that league sources were saying the number for salaries would probably be around 1 million. I was told by someone that given the lack of uproar over that number and kind of pushback, that was probably correct. And I think we've heard a lot of players talk about wanting to be at that 1 million. So I think in terms of salary numbers, that's very good. This kind of 4 times increase is about what the main media rights deal increased as well. That deal went from about $50 million per year on average for that main package, which has a lot to do with ESPN, to $200 million per year. So it seems like we're looking at that increase for everything. And Kathy Engelbert has always said that increase in salaries would be tied with the increase in a media rights deal and creating disruption in the women's sports environment. The sides are meeting again on Wednesday. I was told their meetings are ongoing. Clearly, this is just the numbers that were being given, and players have consistently talked about wanting a revenue share model that they feel allows them to grow with the business. We have not heard anything about that yet. In terms of a deadline, and if one is going to get done, as you said, a little more than a week until that deadline, as with the last one. If a deal is not reached, they would enter a status quo period where they would continue negotiating unless one side locked out or striked, and that would create other issues. As for scheduling for the season coming up, I was on the phone with someone the other day who said minor things are kind of popping up, just kind of the basics that we all live. Things like when do you schedule vacation, when do you plan to be at your computer all the time for free agency, to share that kind of information. So as we go forward, we're definitely kind of crunching into what needs to happen in an off season.
So you bring up the status quo period, which would mean that we just continue life as normal under the existing CBA. But like you mentioned, at any point in time, either side can say, nope, we're done, and the players can strike. So now that we're going into a time where we have expansion draft for 2 expansion teams, like time is of the essence. Still have over a week. The deadline was extended to November 30th. So something to keep in mind, but also something that's not necessarily imminent over the next couple of days. Percentage over number is the thing that I keep seeing reported over and over, and I'm sure it's the same things that you've been hearing from your sources, Cass. Percentage shares, revenue shares over hard and fast and concrete numbers. I get why these players are fighting so hard for the percentages, because who's to say that the revenue in 2026 isn't going to be substantially less than the revenue in 2028 or in 2030? I don't blame the players for wanting their compensation to grow with the growth of the league. I mean, if the league continues to grow at the same rate or even half the rate that it's grown over the last 5 years, then of course you would want your certain cut of that. The hard thing here is we know so little about the finances of the WNBA. So we can look at the numbers that we do know and the numbers that we do have. We do know the TV deals, like you just mentioned, from 50 to 200 million starting in 2026. We do know the league minimums. We do know the league maximums. So we can look at those numbers. We can say, okay, like you very smartly pointed out, the minimums and maximums would be 4x under this proposal. The TV revenue is 4x in 26 versus the TV deal that's already existing. So that makes sense, right? That you are growing relative to the growth of the TV deal. That makes sense. It sounds like a deal that's fair. It sounds to me, just based off of the numbers that we do know, the very little information that we do have about the league's finances, like that sounds fair to me. But I keep going back to the one thing that we've heard is percentages over numbers. That's what the league is fighting, or excuse me, that's what the players are fighting for. The league, though, it's completely opposite. The league wants a hard and fast number. The players want a percentage share. Where's the gray area? Where's the compromise there? I don't even know if that exists.
I don't know. We haven't heard exactly what percentage players want, which makes sense. This is a negotiation. We've heard from Kathy Engelbert and the league side that, hey, like there is technically revenue sharing, in the CBA that they had. They just didn't reach those targets because of the COVID pandemic to do that. I think until, maybe there is a revenue sharing agreement that the players like. But until that happens, I think that's what's really going to hold up this agreement, because as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Izzy Harrison for the Athletes Unlimited basketball season that's coming up in the winter here in January. And I asked her about the CBA, and she said again, as everyone has said, it is about revenue share and increased salaries. And then everything else comes after that, after they figure that out. And there's a lot else to do here. The exact quote that she gave me was, we, the players, have so much leverage. So we can either make you share the money or you can make no money. So what's the best option here?
Ooh. That's a level of confidence that is, if you're a player, it's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, and it's exactly what Alyssa Thomas talked about at All-Star. The league is in such a different situation now than it was at any other CBA, and the players do have leverage. Now, that said, like, to the owner's point and the league's point, and I know Becky Hammon had actually mentioned this on an appearance with CNBC Sports, I believe. She said, there does need to be sustainability. There are people who have been involved in this league for a long time or who know the history of the league, and you don't want to throw that all away. As you said, we don't know exactly the revenue of the W or how things are, decided between it and the NBA, what money looks like. Like, it's very difficult to kind of put a stake in the ground here and say like what's good and what's not. I also think that once they do come to an agreement on revenue share, there's so many things down the line to figure out. The biggest one I want to mention now, as we're sitting here in mid-November, is prioritization. That is the clause that requires players to be back with their WNBA team in time for training camp. So what it's essentially doing is limiting your opportunities to play overseas, where you play overseas, how long you play overseas. It makes complete sense from an owner side. We've talked about this before. You want your best players on the court to begin the season. That's the most exciting time. The reason I think it's important to bring up now, though, is because Project B, the overseas kind of barnstorming league, has begun to announce its players: Nneka Ogwumike, Jewel Lloyd, Jonquel Jones. Athletes Unlimited had its media day. They are gearing up for their season in January. And then Unrivaled, the league by Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, they are also preparing to do the next season of their league, and they will have coaches availability this week. So these things are beginning to cement themselves into the women's basketball landscape, and it's something to consider as CBA moves forward.
You bring up Project B, and I think Project B is a fascinating now new player in these secondary women's leagues. Do you think the WNBA feels any sense of pressure to get this deal done and to commit more money to the players and what they're asking when you look at a league like Project B that's saying like, yeah, like we can promise you millions of dollars. Do you think the WNBA maybe feels pressure or even threatened by some of these alternate leagues?
I think there's probably always a certain level of that,
Yeah.
right? But I also think, for a league like this, I mean, first of all, when it comes to Project B, this is an overseas league, and we've seen recently a lot of top players want to stay home. A lot of players in the past have played overseas. In terms of that, it's not all that much different. Also, all of these are, to a certain extent, startups. The WNBA, for better or for worse, and it's had some down years, has been around for 28 years now, 29, 30. Like, I've lost track. They've been around that long. And so when you have these other leagues, I think for some people in the league office, there is an idea of like, we should keep an eye on them, right? Like, we should be listening to our players and what they want and seeing what other leagues are doing, because it's copycat sports. But certainly, like, I think there is a thought that, well, they haven't been around that long. Like, we'll see.
Longevity is a huge thing because that builds up brand awareness and it builds up brand trust. I go back to, the PGA and Live Golf. And obviously Live Golf has a lot attached to it, different than just an alternative league in golf, but I don't think anybody cares about Live Golf. I don't think anybody sits down on their couch on any given night and is like, let's turn on some Live Golf. People do turn on the PGA, whether you're a golf fan or not. So I think that is a good example of a league that has all of the money in the world, a league that has certified superstars globally participating in it. But since it is in such an infancy, and for some other obvious reasons as well, where the money is coming from, it just hasn't picked up steam, I think, maybe than it was initially anticipated. I'm not saying that's going to happen for Unrivaled or Project B or any of these alternate leagues, but there is something to the brand awareness and the brand trust of the WNBA, the media rights of the WNBA, the things that are built up over time, personalities that are attached to the WNBA that Unrivaled and Project B just don't have. When you have alternate leagues where your superstars are spread out versus in the WNBA, all of your superstars are participating in one league. I think that's an important distinction. But it's not to say that Project B or Unrivaled or any of these other leagues aren't trying to be that premier league in women's basketball.
I think there's also an endorsement conversation to be had here. We've heard a lot over the past 5 or 6 years about players, take your Asia Wilsons, your Caitlin Clarks, Sabrina Ionescu, who have major endorsement deals. And when you have those kinds of endorsement deals, you want to be stateside. You do things in the offseason for those endorsement deals. You want to remain front and center. And I read a quote from someone about how Project B would allow them to have kind of like worldwide notoriety and worldwide endorsement deals. And maybe that is the case. But I mean, I think for a lot of these stars with these big endorsements right now, I don't know how that carries over to a Project B type league. So it's just something to consider as well, that maybe the W doesn't feel is as much of a threat as maybe others feel it is.
And even if it opens you up to global endorsement deals, it does not guarantee global endorsement deals.
Yeah.
I think about Shohei Ohtani, right? A Japanese-born player who was on every single advertisement in Japan, right? I see it all over social media that you can't walk 10 feet without seeing Shohei Ohtani's face on yet another advertisement. That's a much different.
Is he the Caitlin Clark of baseball then?
He's the Caitlin Clark of baseball.
Okay.
That's what they're all saying. That's what we should be saying, at least in terms of exposure. He's the Caitlin Clark of baseball. Anyone could be so lucky to be the Caitlin Clark of whatever they do. But that's a completely different situation, right? We're talking about Shohei Ohtani, Japanese-born and Japanese-raised, who is one of the biggest, if not the biggest stars in the sport, who is doing something that we haven't seen in hundreds of years. Going overseas, that's a completely different story than, hey, I am an American-born player going overseas and participating in a league that's still getting its legs underneath it. I hope for all of these Project B players, they do get those opportunities and they do get that second stream of income and they do get that exposure and that notoriety. It is never a guarantee. I think it's fascinating. I'm fascinated to see how all of these leagues pan out, how Project B pans out, to see more and more players who are committing to that league. I think it's fascinating. But the biggest news of the day, because I think when we talk about the WNBA CBA, it's fair to bring up the other options that players now have afforded to them. But again, the news of the day, the news of the week, the latest proposal in the WNBA CBA. We will follow this and we will be right back here on Hoops 360, keeping you updated with all of the latest in the WNBA CBA. But for right now, keep November 30th circled on your calendars. That is the extension deadline. Let's get into some college hoops, Cass. We had some great games, some great matchups in the non-con. UCLA took on UNC, number 11 UNC, a top 15 team, a team that had a run in the postseason last year. UNC, I am looking as a team to make a run in the ACC, to make yet another run in the postseason. UCLA beat them by 18 points. UCLA, if I can say early, I know it's early, I know it's November 19th, I know we have so much basketball left to be played. UCLA looks like more of a threat this year than they did last year.
Yeah, I think Gianna Neepkins adds, a huge boost to them. I think also you really just can't get away from the fact it's just the truth. It's just reality. Like, it's hard to go up against 6'7" when you don't have 6'7". And Lauren Betts, as skilled as she is, height goes a long way in basketball, and that is very tough. That is a huge asset to have for UCLA.
Oh, 1,000%. It was a huge asset for them last season. And then now you're getting supplementary scoring by Gianna Neepkins, who you just mentioned, who I think we need to be talking about as one of the more impactful transfers in women's college basketball. Now you have you have the threat of Kiki Rice, right? You have the threat of Gianna Neepkins. You have these secondary and tertiary threats that, if any other team can do the daunting task of keeping Lauren Betts in check, because she's going to get hers no matter what. It's just how much you let her get hers. That now you have these secondary and tertiary threats that can step up on any given night. So I think UCLA, if I can say it now, and I reserve the right to change my mind once we see more basketball, UCLA looks like a bigger threat this year than they were last year. And they were a Final Four team last year and one of the best teams in the country. So that's saying something. Last week when we talked with Ava Wallace, we talked about some of the most intriguing conference matchups. And I was looking at the ACC. I was looking at the SEC. Competitive and deep. And on any given night, any given team in that conference can beat anyone. The Big Ten wasn't that. I looked at the Big Ten and said it's UCLA and everybody else. With USC not having JuJu Watkins, obviously that threw a wrench in things. It was initially UCLA and USC with no JuJu Watkins. I can't view USC as that same kind of certified threat. So I was just sitting back here saying, okay, Big Ten, show me why you're interesting. Show me why I should be invested in this conference race, because right now it's UCLA and everybody else. Well, we just saw Michigan keep Hannah Hidalgo in check. And we just saw Michigan beat Notre Dame 93-50 for a butt whooping of epic proportions. I mean, it's Silas Swords, it's Olivia Olson, it's two sophomores that have, really kind of proven to be foundational pieces on this Michigan team. Is Michigan right now, after what they just did to Notre Dame, is Michigan the biggest threat to UCLA in the Big Ten?
I think one of the biggest for sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty high on Michigan. I think a lot of people are high on Michigan, but they kind of went under the radar a little bit. I think sometimes we talk so much about maybe the top 5 teams, who we think is going to be in the Final Four, that we don't touch on all of these other ones. And Michigan is a young team that, as you mentioned, returns their sophomores. They have another sophomore who Kim Barnes-Rico was really high on kind of breaking out this year, had a good preseason. This is a team that has built chemistry together. Their guard play is fantastic. I was not all that surprised about the Notre Dame result, and we're going to get into that. But when it comes to Michigan, I think they have so much scoring potential. And Gino Auriemma has already called it out as potentially the biggest or the best test that he's going to have this year, the best team that they're going to play. And that could just be a UConn head coach being the UConn head coach, but I think there is a lot of a valid point to it, especially the way they did dismantle Notre Dame. And I think they will have a good chance to really push UCLA as well as Maryland, Iowa, maybe even Michigan State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there probably is just like a little bit of posturing in there, just a little bit of like being a tactician from Gino Auriemma's perspective, but it's also true. I mean, this Michigan team, they doubled up Notre Dame in rebounds, essentially, in addition to points. I mean, Hannah Hidalgo, who was coming off of a career game, was held to 12 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals coming off of a 16-steal game. I mean, like, Hannah Hidalgo is still going to find herself in the box score, but she was kind of a non-factor in this game. And I know we're only talking about one game in and of itself, but whenever you do something like that and have such a statement performance against a team who just had a statement performance of their own, I think that's worthy of investing in. And so when I asked the question, like, is Michigan going to be the biggest threat to UCLA? I think we're going to find out, because you just mentioned it. They have a date with UConn on Friday night. Like, that, I think, is going to be the game of the weekend, or at least one of the game of the weekends for me of, okay, Michigan. Now, you just did that to Notre Dame. Now you're a top 10 team in the country. They're sitting at number 6 in the AP poll right now. I'm not going to say they have to do to UConn what they did to Notre Dame, but how do you hang with UConn? Like, that's such a great litmus test. If we want to talk about you as being one of the best teams in the country, if we want to talk about you about going toe-to-toe with a legitimate national title contender and being a national title contender of yourself, how do you look against another national title contender in UConn?
Yeah. And in the long term, I think a lot of people look at this time of year as, did you win or did you lose? And I understand, because that is how you boost a resume and help yourself out when it comes to March. But as we've said before, like, the other way you help yourself out when it comes to March is, how do you stack up against this elite competition that you're playing? Yeah. And then moving out of it, if they don't play well, or they play well, but they just fall short, what do we need to do in the next 4 months or whatever it is, so that if we meet UConn again in the tournament, we have a different result? Because that's exactly what happened with Notre Dame. And I know that this is like apples to green beans comparison, given what's going on in Notre Dame. But they lost to Notre Dame in the tournament, and they mentioned that. They got their get back this time around. I think Michigan has, the chance to like develop very well this year. And in 2 years from now, that's going to be a very dangerous team if they stay around.
Well, yeah, we just mentioned 3 sophomores that were freshmen last year, getting their first experience in the tournament. We talk so much about trust in these teams, how much we trust these head coaches. Like, there is a certain BOD that South Carolina and UConn get, or Texas gets, because we trust their head coaches. That's the same thing with experience on a roster. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to trust Michigan and their longevity in the tournament last year, because so many of their key and focal point players were getting tournament experience for the first time. It's easy to trust teams that have players with a ton of tournament experience and a ton of experience together. Well, now you've got Silas Wards and Olivia Olson, who have an entire year of experience under their belts. They have a tournament experience under their belts. They have some of these early non-conference games against legitimately tough opponents that they're almost, that they're compounding that kind of experience. So now that this Michigan team is getting experience, and look, I know it's early. I hear everybody out there rolling their eyes that it's only November 19th. I get that. I totally understand that. So of course, everything that we say, we can take with a grain of salt, understanding that it's early in the season, but having that experience under their belts is, I think, going to be the difference, could potentially be the difference for this Michigan team.
Also want to call out Mila Holloway, who is a sophomore, and Tayala Delfase, who did not play a lot last year, but is already averaging 10 points per game. They have 5 players averaging at least 10, which, as you said, grain of salt. It's A, 4 games in, and B, not, Big Ten competition every night. But still, like, incredibly impressive. And I think you're seeing a lot of players already take the next step in their game. And as you said, we'll just continue to go on. So I definitely have Michigan, UCLA circled.
Tayala Delfase, 9 points off the bench. Michigan had 36 points off the bench against Notre Dame. Now, obviously, you can go to your depth a lot more whenever you're up by 40. But still, I mean, like that's another kind of little bullet point on a resume of a national title contender is how much do you trust your depth? And Michigan was able to trust and go to their depth in that game against Notre Dame. Let's talk about Notre Dame, because you would have thought about Notre Dame that I think is very important to touch on. Maybe this Jekyll and Hyde type of team, or a Jekyll and Hyde, sample size that we've had recently. We had Hannah Hidalgo go off for 44 points and 16 steals in a 30-point win. Now, granted, it was over Akron, but you get credit for beating up on bad teams and doing what you're supposed to do. She added 9 rebounds and 4 assists, a career game, a historic performance for Hannah Hidalgo. They turn around, they lay the egg against Michigan. How much do you trust Notre Dame?
I don't trust Notre Dame too much. You asked a good question. I think it was, is Notre Dame must watch? Notre Dame is must watch because of Hannah Hidalgo, right? Like very much a National Player of the Year contender, very much making defense exciting. The way that she can pick a pocket and collect all of those steals is very fun to watch. She's always on triple-double watch. Like we know what Hannah Hidalgo can do. The question is, what can Notre Dame do? And I think we're going to continue to see that unless something bonkers happens, they go as Hannah goes. And I don't think that is great. They lost so much talent last year. There's like 28% of their scoring returning. Olivia Miles was out. Kate Koval was going to be kind of this front court player of the next few years. She left. You have all these transfers, the graduation, Sonia Citron graduating, going on to a great WNBA career. Great WNBA rookie year, I should say. They did not backfill any of that level of talent. So I think automatically you look at Notre Dame and they're not going to be the same team as they were last year. And I think in the ACC, I don't know how good a lot of these teams are going to be. Duke has not instilled confidence in me early. So maybe Notre Dame can, stay kind of atop the ACC race. But I think when you're talking about nationally, you have to be more than Hannah Hidalgo, and I don't know that they can be.
When you look at, we just talked about UCLA and their depth. We talk about South Carolina and their depth, Michigan and their depth. It's great to have a superstar, and sometimes you might need a superstar on a path to a championship. Notre Dame has that. Notre Dame has a certified superstar, if not the superstar in the sport. But Michigan just showed you the blueprint to keep her in check. That's not something that every team on Notre Dame's schedule is going to be able to do. That's what makes a superstar a superstar, is when you get doubled and tripled and you still make an impact in the box score nonetheless. But there are going to be days when when teams that play Notre Dame keep Hannah Hidalgo in check. Who else can step up? Who else can make an impact outside of Hannah? That is what gives me pause. That's what makes me hesitant, is let me see it. Let me see these role players step up and be able to take Superman's cape whenever it's taken away from her. And I look at Duke. You mentioned Duke. They fell out of the top 25. And they lose to Baylor at the beginning of the season in Paris. I don't think that's anything to, scoff at. But then it lost to West Virginia. And it doesn't get any easier for Duke. They have South Carolina coming up, a number 2 team in the country. They have LSU coming up, the 5th-ranked team in the country. And they have South Florida, which is, a group of 5 team that I don't think is anyone that you can just look past. Like, Duke has a really difficult non-con. And Kara Lawson scheduled those games strategically. She said, I want to find the flaws in my team before we get into conference play. So, of course, Duke has plenty of runway to make up for, but it just makes the ACC feel that much more wide open. And it gives some of these teams that maybe were a second or like an afterthought to us in the ACC to say, hey, on any given night, sure, Duke can be vulnerable. Notre Dame can be vulnerable, so on and so forth. I think that Notre Dame is a fascinating one to follow. Who steps up for Notre Dame? That's going to be the major question. For a player that we're not going to see this year in women's college basketball, obviously it's JuJu Watkins. She's, she is on the sidelines injured for this season. She tore an ACL late last season, but that doesn't mean that she's going to be out of the headlines. And the latest in JuJu Watkins, that she has invested in Boston's professional women's sports team called The Legacy. So JuJu Watkins, with her investment into The Legacy, she became the first NCAA athlete to directly invest in a professional women's sports team. Cass, is that just the first of many to come? Are we going to see more and more athletes at the college level become investors?
Quite possibly. When I saw this come out, the first thing I thought of was way back, if you can take your brain back to 2020, when Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe had their little A Touch More video Instagram story thing, and Diana Taurasi was on for 4 hours. And in this treasure trove, I pulled up the quotes, and she said, everyone is like, do you want to be a coach? Do you want to be a GM? No, Taurasi said. I want to effing own it. Obviously, it's DT. She did not use effing. She used the word.
Let it fly.
She continued later on, where are the rich women? I'm so disappointed in the women that have a lot of money. Sometimes you invest in things that don't make money yet, but you want to make them better. Very, very quickly in the 5+ years since she was on that, we've seen a lot of women invest. And I think there's two things to be said about it. And this very much applies to JuJu. First of all, you're seeing more women in sports make more money, right? Aaliyah Boston is also a part of this. You're seeing massive endorsement deals, and that's how athletes make the crux of their money. Women are becoming more rich by the year being in sports because of what is going on. And I think the second thing is when you have money, you can begin to invest and take a piece of things that matter to you or be involved in things that matter to you. Same thing we've always seen from men. And specifically in terms of this conversation, very rich athletes. Women are finally at that point. I think we probably will see this a little bit more, but maybe not as much, because I don't know, beyond the JuJus and the Caitlins and et cetera, how much other players are making to be able to make that type of investment.
We see teams like Angel City FC in the NWSL. It's owned by Natalie Portman, Serena Williams, Billie Jean King, former U.S. women's national team members, that they are all investors into Angel City. And it became one of the first primarily women-owned professional sports teams, in sports. So yes, you're right that it kind of started with celebrities or former professional athletes, those who have made their money playing their sport and, enjoying the endorsements that have come their way. For JuJu Watkins to be able to do this as a collegiate athlete, I think just shows the opportunities that NIL can afford some of these players. That we've gone beyond, okay, you're buying a fancy car, you live in a cool apartment, and you're able to dress in designer clothes for, for the walkouts or whatever you might do, or any appearances you might do. We have business women. Like these are now millionaires in college who are business women and investing their money. And I think that is so incredibly cool to see. Not only an athlete do this, but to see a female athlete be the first one to do it. And to see a female athlete invest into a women's professional sports team, I think shows the power of women's sports. And I think it also shows the power of NIL. NIL can be, we talked a lot about how bad it is for college sports. People say it's ruining college sports, which makes me roll my eyes a little bit. For as much quote unquote bad as there might be out there for NIL, this is the good. Like this shows us what NIL can do for college athletes when they want to, play a larger role in sports society beyond just playing the game. I think it's so cool.
Yeah. I think there's like pros and cons to NIL. I understand what you're saying. I would also say, though, that JuJu's probably going to get some kickback money out of this. It is an investment. Yeah. It is cool that like she gets to do that. I think for many of us, like, I feel like I know I made it when I was like, oh, I can like, I don't know, invest in like adult things. I don't even know the words.
Yeah.
But when
you have a 401k, if you will.
That, yeah.
That.
Like I think one of the big things is, and you probably mentioned this, like she's making an investment that she probably feels she's going to get something out of. And I think also probably to like encapsulate all of the points that we've made, women know that women's sports can be big business. They have always known this. We have always, you and I, Ice, everyone have always talked about how the games are being held back. And a female athlete doing this knowing that she can help grow the business and then make money off the business like everyone else, like kudos to her.
Yeah, you're an investor. You want to make money out of it. That's what people invest into things. So good for JuJu, and good for JuJu for putting her money where her mouth is, where all of our mouths are, and saying invest into women's sports. Invest into women because it will be lucrative, because you will get something out of it. JuJu isn't just, putting that messaging out there. She's doing it. She is actively putting her money where her mouth is, and I hope that she's the first of many. I hope that she kind of kickstarts or maybe blazes this trail of the future for not just investment into women's sports, but women investing into women's sports. I love this. I think it's awesome. Boston's a fantastic women's sports city too. So if you're in that area, if you can make it there, go check out a game. Go check out, any of the women's sports in your local community, because they're all freaking awesome. Shout out to JuJu Watkins. Some upcoming games to watch this weekend, this upcoming week and weekend in women's college basketball. USC Notre Dame feels significantly less, cool and impactful than it did maybe after Hannah Hidalgo's performance, but still a game to watch. That game's on Friday at 6 o'clock Eastern time. Michigan UConn, that's my game of the week. That game comes on right after USC Notre Dame at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Kentucky Louisville, a nice little in-state rivalry going down Saturday, a little matinee at 2 o'clock Eastern time. Any other games that you are looking at this upcoming weekend that you have circled?
Yeah, if you want to get your weekend started on Thursday, I like the Iowa-Baylor matchup. These are two undefeated teams. You have kind of an elite team right now in the Big Ten in Iowa, an elite team in the Big 12 in Baylor. I think this is going to be a big test for both of them. We started this pod by talking about UCLA and who can challenge them. We might get a glimpse of what Iowa could do. They have a transfer from Georgia Tech, Chit Chat Wright, at the guard position. Hannah Stuelke is a senior. When it comes to Baylor, we talked about Talia Scott on the first day of the season, also one of the best transfers so far this year. So I have my eye on that one to start the weekend.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. I'm always pro starting the weekend on Thursday, just in general. And with women's college basketball, obviously, of course. And we will be back right here next week to break down all of that action. We'll bring you the latest in the WNBA CBA, the biggest stories in women's college basketball on and off the court. And of course, we get to your questions. If you have any questions for us, comments, concerns, things you want us to touch on, we're here for you. So email us at hoops360@yahoosports.com, HOOPS360@yahoosports.com. We will see you right here back next week. For Cassandra Negley, I am Caroline Fenton. Thanks for tuning in. It's Hoops 360.